What's going on, Reef Builders? I'm Jake Adams. Welcome back to another video from the Reef Builder Studio. I think our last couple clips were from Orlando at Reef Palooza, so it's really good to be back here in the studio because we have a very fun project to share with you today. If you haven't seen this tank before, this is about a 30-inch cube. It's roughly around 100 gallons. You see it's half filled with water, and it's kind of a mangrove aquarium. And I've experimented with a variety of different lights on this tank, but very recently Kessil announced their brand new A500X LED light. It's 185 watts of power, and as you can see, I've been using a couple of these on some goosenecks that just barely hold it up because it's a little bit bigger of light. So I've been kind of brainstorming a better, more flexible, more rigid solution to put the lights higher over the aquarium in order to get just concentrate more of that light within the tank and kind of reduce some of the hot spots. So what I'm going to be going with is basically the extension version of the Kessil mount, and then I took one of the extension tubes and cut it in half because I really want to bring the lights forward and then point them backwards to illuminate the part of the corals and the trees that we see the most. But most of all, I want to kind of lean in even harder to the spotlight form factor and be able to add the narrow angle Kessil LED reflectors. So currently I'm using the 55-degree reflectors, and if you can see, there's a good bit of light kind of coming through the tank on both sides and even here at the front. So obviously we're not capturing as much of the light as we can. So the game plan is to pretty much raise this to a ridiculously high level and then put one of the narrow angle reflectors to really get the light off the glass, stop it from going through the glass, and just really focus all the light where the corals and the trees are. If you've watched a lot of my videos, I generally kind of push back against par values throughout the aquarium because unless you really know what you're doing, you can get yourself into more trouble than if you didn't have those par values and actually observed the animals in your aquarium. But in this case, since we're dealing with 185 watts of concentrated power times 2, and we're going to be switching over from the 55-degree reflector to the 35-degree reflector, I thought it would be really unique and informative to take a par measurements inside and outside the tank, and you'll be kind of shocked what we got. So one thing I do want to point out is that the standard issue, or the best par meter right now in the aquarium hobby for our purposes, is the Apogee MQ510. Now, the reason this is for aquarium purposes is this has a pre-calculated immersion coefficient factor. So when you stick an old style par meter in the tank, it's not going to give you accurate values unless you have the coefficient built in. So this is the MQ510 from Apogee, but since we took some measurements outside of the water, had to pull out my old MQ200, and you'd be surprised at some of the different values that we got. And then that came about because Evan was asking me what's a par value outside, and we took them both outside, and the out of water, the MQ510 gave us a par measurements of almost 3,000 micromoles for sunshine, which is not right. It should be about 2,000 or less. And then this one gave us 1,900 because it's noon right now. So this is for immersed readings. This is for submerged readings. So little tangent, and that's part of the reason why it's really critical to have a critical understanding or deeper understanding of, you know, how these tools work. So real quick, I want to kind of, we took some par measurements and just kind of, you know, wrote them on the glass in specific places and even outside the tank. So hand me the camera and I'll show you around. So like I said, we have you know, a big section of air right here where the trees are and a big section of water. But the first thing that really grabbed my attention, as you can see, there's a lot of light bleeding off right here coming directly from the Kessils. And that's not the Kessil's fault, that's my, I guess my fault because of how they're mounted. So right outside the glass, right here, holding the meter, it's 130 micromoles just above the water line, but below the water line where the effect of the water helps the glass to reflect the light, it's right at about 20 par. But over here, on this tank right here, this par value is 70 when the par meter is pointing this way towards the A500X. And then even back here, right on this back wall, it was like 86, and then lower down, it was 44. So clearly we are, you know, it looks really good, but there's a lot of light that we're, you know, leaking outside the aquarium, but that's only a function of having this half open air aquarium. And here, right side of the water, right side of the tank above the water line, there's 150 micromoles. This is where the air measurements are really important because, let me see if I can change that tracking right there. So this right here, come on, focus, 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 focus. All right, well anyway, right where the mangroves are, the reddish one and this one right here was 800 micromoles with the MQ510 apogee par meter, but then when we use the MQ200, it was 700. So that's a big difference in par. So if you're taking measurements out of water, make sure that you're using the right tool. Right here at the water line, outside the tank, it was about 75 micromoles. All right, so enough of the outside the tank measurements. Right here, right in front of that Hygno and next to the purple Milka Stylo, there's 150 micromoles right there on the ground. And I know it can get brighter, but we're using those wide angle reflectors and the fixture is like 3 feet above the bottom of the tank. Right here in this corner in the tank, it was 130. Right where that clam is, where that clownfish is in the long polyp leather, that was 180 micromoles. Right within the immortal tort, that purple guy right there, it's 250 micromoles. Kind of behind it, between the sarcophyton and the alveopora, it was about 300 micromoles. And literally put the par meter sensor right inside that orange cap and got right around 150 micromoles. So clearly this tank is an illumination challenge, right? Because we have the tank half filled with water. We're also trying to illuminate the trees, trying to use the lights to do just a whole bunch of things. But this is definitely one of those nice brain teasers that has really gotten our reef builders' creativity flowing. And I'm really excited to raise the lights, use the narrow angle reflectors, and just see how much more of that light we can rebalance and refocus. Like I said, this is not the normal way to do a reef tank, but we took some par values before and after, so when we get the lights how we want them, we'll be able to take some values with you afterwards and compare. So thanks for joining me on this video. We are going to switch out the lights and come back when that's done. All right, so we went through a lot of effort just to raise the lights another foot in order to be able to use the narrow angle reflector. And we took a lot of par measurements inside the tank and inside the tank, but not in the water, and outside the tank. And I'm happy to report that we've kind of nailed it, because this 800 to 700 micromoles here in the middle was definitely a hot spot. Don't remember which commenter it was was, but somebody corrected me very accurately that red mangroves are not red because their leaves turn red when they get real bright. It's because of the color of their wood. And so hopefully in time that kind of bleachy looking mangrove there in the center is going to green up. So 800 with the MQ510, which is not made for air measurements, 700 micromoles with the MQ200. And after we raise the lights another foot, we're now at around 450 micromoles. So I think that's gonna be plenty for the trees. Right here at the water line outside the tank, we went from 75 to 45 micromoles. So we've definitely contained a lot more of that light, probably because we're able to bring the lights forward and point them backwards to illuminate more of the face of the corals. Kind of same thing over here. We took a measurement just on this glass and it went from 70 to 50 micromoles. Here on the back wall, it went from 86 to 40. And over here, right outside, we went from 150 to 80. So that might be a little weird thing to measure, but again, this is kind of like a saltwater vivarium, and we just wanted to measure how much light we're losing to bleed due to this very unusual light setup. All right, so now how about inside the tank? So for these, we only used the blue MQ510 from Apogee, which is specially made for water. And over here, right where the clownfish are in the long polyp leather, we went from 180 to 165 micromoles. Over here, we went from 130 to 100. This spot right here on the ground in the center of the tank stayed at 150. Right within that toric, we went from 250 to 200. And between that leather coral and the alvipora, we went from 300 to 240 micromoles. Finally, over here in the orange cap, we went from 150 to 140 micromoles. So you'll notice that none of those values went up. They mostly went down, and they kind of evened out throughout the tank. It was really strange getting the lights up to a specific height and the tank really looked the same. And if it looks the same, you might be asking, well, why did we do it then? And the reason we did this is because, one, I want to be able to light up the trees more uniformly. So we almost cut that in half as far as the peak intensity in the center of the mangrove grove, but now we also have more brightness on the sides, and as the trees get taller and taller, we'll be able to raise these lights along with the trees and still give them the lighting that they need. Once that happens, once the trees start shading the corals, we'll have to come up with some more clever solution to light up the trees and the corals more evenly. Now, if you have your thinking hat on, you might be saying to yourself, you know what, Jake, that point source lighting is really not great for three-dimensional corals, and you know, you are absolutely right. So we currently have some acros, stylo, hydnophora, a little bit more acro, and then some monopora right here. And you can see much stronger glimmer lines, and you can see much harder shadows. It's really evident right here on the thin branching green hydnophora. And it's for that specific purpose that we're gonna let this tank run as is, as you see it, for just a little while. I wanna see the response of the corals we do have in here. I'm pretty sure the flat corals, the leather corals, since they're moving around and catching all kinds of different rays of light, they're not really gonna care. But the long-term plan for this tank is to put two-dimensional corals in here. So we're gonna make this a purely, almost purely Montipora capricornus showcase. We have a very large specimen of true length-side purple rim capricornus over there that cameraman Evan grew out for a while. And then we have some orange cap here and a little bit more over there. So I think it's safe to say that this experimentation was a success. It should not, I'm not sure how much about this tank setup you can glean for your own aquarium applications. I just wanted to share with you something kind of tricky that we're doing. I did want to mention that in our previous PAR measurements, we were at 100% intensity on all channels, and then the blue-white color balance was at about 75% blue, 25% white, and it kind of gave that blend. So you'll notice we don't have the K-link connected, so with these measurements, this one is on just natively full brightness, and this one is on that same preset setting. We haven't routed up the K-Link cable, but yeah, I think it's a really, really fun exercise, and it's going to give us a little bit more access here into the tank because the lights are 1 foot higher. When the other tanks are dimmer, there is still some light bleed on the side of the tank, but it is pointing much more downwards than sideways. And one of the fun, tricky things I was able to do to this tank recently, don't judge me because it's my first ever misting system, but I have noticed that with these particular mangroves, it's really dry here in Colorado. This tank does not build up any kind of humidity. There's a lot of airflow coming through here. And I set up a misting system. So I will take the camera and just kind of show you that real quick. There's an automatic misting system here. And now that the lights are much higher, they're out of the spray zone, but this helps to basically remove the salts from the leaf of the mangrove trees. And it just looks freaking cool, man. I'm really, really happy about it. So thank you so much for joining me on this video. Let me turn that off real quick. I'm gonna have that turn on probably automatically, just, I don't know, 1 or 2 minutes, twice a week in the middle of the night, so that the lights aren't on at the same time. But you see now the trees have gotten a nice natural rain, and we have some condensation here. You can't see inside the tank. Like I said, I'm not sure how applicable this is gonna be to like the average reef tank. If this tank was full of water, the PAR values would be dramatically different because the water against the glass is what causes the reflection inside the tank. So take for, that for what you want. And if you have any questions about this setup, make sure to put those down in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it around and subscribe and hit that notification bell, all those fun things. This is one of our funnest tanks here at the Reef Aquarium Studio. Really want to thank Kessil for supporting this experiment in reef aquariology. And yeah, looking forward to seeing what you guys have to say about this video, and we'll catch you guys on the next one very soon. Later, guys.